out. Sorry. Tell some kind of story. King lined with saints on the bottom. Looks like a Roman soldier. Absalom. I bet you they have this all written somewhere. It says it right there. Someone in Israel. Maybe that's who killed Jesus or something. Some other king up here. Bunch of saints on the bottom. That for sure looks like Jesus right there, right? One you can't really see. King. Very cool place. This place I'm at, chapel built in the year 1130, Norman times, Sicily, where there was a coexistence of a lot of people in this the city at that time when this was built was majority Muslim, and so were all the artisans and architects and engineers. So this church ceiling and design, artwork, and the style of Arabic Palermo design, which then was inscribed with incredible Byzantine style, golden. Whoa. Okay, here we are inside the 1130 built chapel for the palace. This site stands on a 700s BC Carthaginian Phoenician building. But let's fast forward to when this was built. Obviously Christian church. This is the re-Christianization of Palermo when this was built. But it is a prime example of the synchronization era of the Normans. Because this was built with Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire, and Arabic style of architecture, plus Catholic architecture. The Sicilian, especially this ceiling, is the style of Muslim grand buildings. And also the artwork, the geometric shapes. Muslim designers were very geometric. Kind of looks like the Star of Judah, huh? There are also many Jewish people in Palermo. And engraved in gold. They actually obviously had a lot of money. And it shows different Bible stories because most people were illiterate. And, probably only royalty was allowed inside here. I'm not sure. There's the, did you get this one? A Sicilian poet, a Sicilian Arab poet, wrote as the Normans advanced. He fled, like a lot of people, thinking they were going to slaughter everybody, which they didn't. He wrote, as the wolves run through the forest, so do the invaders demolish what they find on our island. Oh, sea, why do you separate me from my homeland? If I could only sail back to my beloved Sicily. So as the Normans were invading, 1061 is when they first came. The Normans, who were the holy warrior expansionists, who were the descendants of Vikings and French from the Duchy of Normandy, who went all kinds of places like England, Ireland, Constantinople. They built this, several other things all around Sicily. Shortly after, a long time after. Anyways. The Normans were interesting people. All right, so let's talk about the Normans, descendants of Vikings and people from Normandy, France, which they mixed with and ran their Duchy of Normandy. They were expanding all over the place, like England, famously, starting the royal family there that exists to this day. They went to Ireland. They were mercenaries for the Byzantines in Constantinople, and they ended up actually turning on them and taking over Constantinople. That's crazy. They sacked it once, I believe. Let's focus on Sicily, though. So a royal family of Normans made their way to Sicily from their new kingdom, the Kingdom of Naples, and then later became the Kingdom of Sicily that lasted from 1072 to 1194. Normans took control of the capital city of Palermo because of the infighting of the weakened Muslim leadership. Palermo was swiftly captured, the beginning of Norman and returned to Christian rule of the city. As you can see here, this beautiful palace church. It's very Christian, right? Although the majority of the population, especially in western Sicily and cities like Palermo, the majority of people, up to 80%, were Muslim. The Normans, don't want to interrupt the tour.
Sì, delle connette.
Look at this.
E trovare delle domande.
All right. Like I said, the Normans marveled at the technology, culture, science, economy, architecture, and more of the city and people here. They were brute Northern Europeans that were in the midst of what we call the Dark Ages, and they saw what they were doing here in Palermo, and they were amazed, man. Even stuff like food processing, they were very amazed by the advancements of the people here. The Dark and Middle Ages, Normans still though took over. They were far much less educated and intellectual than the great Muslim cities of the world like Cairo, Cordoba in Spain, which was the capital of the Emirate of Spain. The Normans synthesized the culture here, though. Most people in Northern Europe were illiterate, unlike here where most people could read. Palermo had great schools of study for hundreds of years. The Normans synthesized their incoming power not by force but cooperation with the much more sophisticated city. They welcomed a blending of the best of what had existed. The Muslim, Jewish, remaining Byzantine and Latins and more were left unbothered into this new blending of culture under Norman rule. The Normans, amazed by the expertise of Muslim engineers, architects, artisans, mathematics, and astronomers, employed Arabs for several purposes, like building this place. That's why this is in Arabic style, Muslim style, the ceiling especially. Yeah, not Arabic is the wrong word, more like North African. Some of them were descendants of Berbers, stuff like that. Probably be interesting mix of different people. They're all Muslim. There was buildings of great cathedrals like in Montreal and palaces like Zissa and this one. The Palace of Zissa was entirely built with Islamic cosmology, geometry, architectural techniques at the spot of a former pleasure garden for the sultans called the Garden of Heaven and Earth. So this though also was built and was the home of the Norman king of Sicily. A little bit later, 1130s. Hope you're enjoying the artwork. Mashkinira, please wear a mask indoors. So I'm just reading here, rambling about this time. It's really fascinating. This place is freaking beautiful. The incomers, Normans, even adopted some Muslim fashion. They thought they liked their fashion sense here. So it was a golden age, a synchronization of cultures, a functioning and thriving society, especially in the 1100s and around 1130, the ascension of Roger II, Norman king of Sicily, exactly when this was built. I believe. I'm gonna have to double check. Check out the geometry designs. I'm trying to film upwards so nobody's in it. The ceiling is the best part, I think. Okay. Lost my spot, of course. There we go. All right. There was some effort of re-Christianization of the people. You know, being Christian was very highly esteemed thing for the royalty and leadership all over Europe at the time. They spent massive amounts of money to build giant art-filled and gold churches like this place, actually. They changed some existing mosques into churches. And, you know what? Speaking of that, Speaking of that, I always wish that they left at least one of those, in places that do that, I always wish they left at least one mosque untouched, unchanged, or whatever, you know, a place where the leadership changes, the buildings change. Like, why do they gotta turn all the old pagan Roman temples into churches? Not all of them, but they've done it to a lot of them. You know, like, I always wish they would leave one building unchanged. Just one. Like, if one mosque of Palermo still existed, that would be really cool. Like in Sofia, they have one Ottoman mosque still there, Sofia, Bulgaria. They never changed it or tore it down. You can't get into the head of people 1,000 years ago. So that decision was made. Hundreds of mosques in Palermo are all gone. But the architecture still here, the influence of that golden age is still here. What's another place like that? Ah, yes. Okay. Wrote it down. The Pantheon in Rome, for example, was changed to a church. Come on. Just leave it as the Pantheon. Why do that? The Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which was originally a church, has now been changed to a mosque. That was built by Justinian I in It should just leave it. It was a museum for a long time. Oh, don't get me started on that one. And one for sure is in Jerusalem, the 3 Jewish temples that once stood there, and now the Dome of the Rock Mosque, which is an ancient, beautiful building. Don't even get me started on that one either. Controversial stuff. All right, I'm not even touching that one. But this was another golden age where people of many different backgrounds coexisted in a harmonious, cosmopolitan culture. Palermo was the capital of the Kingdom of Sicily. And this is a dope, awesome place. All right, so a lot of Arabs and Muslims fled as the Normans came in, but actually they harbored a harmonious society because the brute Northern European Normans who came in here noticed that the culture that was here, mathematics, science, architecture, engineering, was beyond anything they could understand. So they let artisans and scientists and different people of all religions thrive in the newly conquered Palermo, including the Arabic locals that built this. So, the Normans were smart. Instead of wiping out the whole place and destroying everything, they let it flourish more into a golden age of synchronicity of different peoples, of different beliefs, all kinds of places they were from. Byzantines, Greeks, Jewish people, probably of all different races, Arabic people, Muslim people of a bunch of different races, probably Christians, all coexisted together here nearly 1,000 years ago, around 1,000 years ago. It's crazy filming. And Muslim artisans and architects were especially experts at the geometric shapes, like these on the floors and on the ceiling. But they also were inspired by ancient designs from the Romans and Greek times, like the Corinthian columns here. They're also inspired, this artwork, especially by Byzantium, Eastern Roman Empire, which is kind of pretty close by, right? The artwork looks very much like Eastern Orthodox churches that you find now in Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, places like that. Very similar. They have all the saints up like that, and beautiful, beautiful. Gold-plated, incredible, awesome. We're here in the palace. This was the throne room for the king, Norman king, and also the Swabian ones that came after him. And it's built in the style, let's go up a little bit, get them out of it. Built in the style of Muslim buildings in North Africa. And interestingly, it said over here, the Italian language was formulated in this room where the king used to hang out with poets. One of the places. writing poetry. And it had some mosaic artwork that's no longer there on the walls. And yeah. That's where we're at.
Now it's time to go get some lunchy.
Kingdom of Sicily.
And what did you tell me to do before today?
Eat breakfast. All right, we're here at the outside of the palace. Massive, pretty unique. Over there is a gate that was built in the Spanish Aragonese time we're about to get into. But this spot is super important to our story so far because of its ancient base that was Phoenician building, and then it was a Roman building, I believe, maybe Carthaginian. They were all here. Arab-inspired architecture, Norman, and then subsequent rulers afterwards of Palermo. Mountains on this side, there's one famous guy, I guess, statue of him. Beautiful mountains. Royal crest of someone up there, obviously added to over the time, still used actually. We saw there's some meeting by politicians inside there. So we're going to talk about the next is the post-Norman kind of rough time of Palermo, and rough for a lot of its inhabitants as well. Up there, the Sicilian flag, inspired by ancient artwork with that same logo on it from the Greeks that were here in Sicily. Like 700 BC or something. It's crazy. Okay, so let's go. To the Norman times, 1100s. There was a woman, the princess of the king, I believe, of Sicily. She was deeply faithful, and she wanted to withdraw from her noble life. Her name was Ray.z.a. So the story is, she was the daughter of King Roger, who was saved by a friend from an attacking lion while hunting. So royals were always big fans of hunting, and there were lions in Sicily. Until when were there lions in Sicily? That's crazy. The kids. All right. He offered his friend that saved his life from a lion attack. Oh, sorry. Saved his life. And his friend creepily asked to marry his daughter Ray.z.a. So Ray.z.a, who was a teenager at the time, with beautiful blonde hair and beautiful looks, she didn't want to marry this older man, obviously. Let's move over here.
A me non dà fastidio.
No, vabbè, se ne va isola, perfetto.
The sun's going down on the mountain back there. The park is vibrant with life. Perfect time to tell a story. So it involves this rock back here. But first, we're in Norman times that we already discussed. So she wanted to run away from this man that was trying to marry her, and she moved to a nunnery where nuns lived, but he kept bothering her, this guy. So Ray.z.a was so mad about this guy. Legend has it she went up and she was led by angels into the mountain. I believe first that mountain that the sun's setting over right now, which it looks pretty epic. But she ended up going to this mountain, and she lived up there, a devout Catholic, praying every day as a hermit for the rest of her days. She lived up in that mountain for 12 years. And she died there, and no one knew of her death. But what a creeper, right? The guy who made her withdraw and leave the palace, and like, that was her dad's friend. Like, why couldn't he just back off a little bit, man? It's a crazy story. Happened in the 1100s, so we're talking a long time before. All right, so let's fast forward to the time we're talking about, 1600. Let's move over here. Oh, I want to get the sunset.
Pollution.
Yeah, I don't like the pollution. Okay, so right on this spot pretty much. In 1624, in the height, it's interesting to talk about this in 2020, COVID. Well, 1624 was a hell of a lot worse than 2020. Everyone says this is the worst year ever. Something was raging, it's called the plague, all around Europe, North Africa. So in Palermo at first, as the sun goes down here, beautiful. Ships were coming in, a ship specifically from Tunisia they thought was infected with the plague, right in this port right here. So actually, this is where the word quarantine comes from. It actually originates in Palermo. So ships that were docked with people that they thought had the plague had to be docked for 40 days. 40 kind of translates to 40, which means 40 in Italian. But also, a lot of people think it means like some time has passed. Anyway, that's where the word quarantine comes from, that we still use now. That especially affected a lot of people this year. As the sun goes down, beautiful. All right, so a ship from Tunisia was here in the port, filled with a bunch of goods for whoever was in the castle at the time, some Spanish baron or viceroy. Or not the castle, the palace. It was filled with a bunch of jewels and camels and all kinds of products for the leader. But this ship was thought to have the plague on it, so they didn't want it coming into the city. But the viceroy or whoever he was living in the palace wanted his goods. So he allowed them to come in, which was a terrible thing to do. Because the plague started raging throughout Palermo. All kinds of people were dying. The guy who ordered that ship to be brought in the palace himself died of the plague not long after of that. So how does this have to do with her up here, Saint Ray.z.a? Well, she wasn't a saint yet. Let's talk about it. Alright, so the guy's name was Emmanuel. His entire crew of the ship that came in from Tunisia had the plague. The year was 1624, it was right here. The guy, Emmanuel, let the crew off. Everybody was telling him not to do it because it had a bunch of riches that he wanted. And then the plague started raging through the city. 400 years later or so, we have a different kind of virus. Same kind of situation. History, what's the saying? History doesn't repeat itself. It's, oh man, it's such a good quote. Forget.
Check the comments
Check
below.
the comments. All right, so Emmanuel was one of the first people to die. The quarantine was supposed to be for all ships where people they thought had the plague. I told you that the name quarantine was derived from this, Italian quarenta, meaning 40 or quite a long time. The people of the city, they prayed to their saints, 4 saints, Saint Nympha, Saint Olivia, and 2 other ones. Check the comments. I talked about them earlier. They prayed to them day and night while the plague was raging in the city. They had masses all throughout the night, 24/7. The devout Catholic city was so sad by this. So they asked God to relieve them of the plague, but it just kept killing people. So that's when this mountain here comes into the story. So a man whose wife had died from the disease ravaging 1620s Palermo, he decided to go on a hike up that mountain right there, just to clear his head, maybe just out of grief. Who knows what the reason was. We're bothering some people on a boat. Oh, now we're next to them. It's crowded down here. All right, we can see it. Big old anchor. That's pretty cool. Okay. So while he was up there, remember, Ray.z.a, the Norman princess, went up there and died as a hermit. Pretty sure it's up there. Yeah, it is. because that's where the hike was that I was going to go to. So a massive storm hit when he was hiking up there, and he had to spend the night. He had a vision. Ray.z.a, the young girl that died up there as a devout Catholic hermit, took him to her bones where she died, that nobody knew where it was before. So he gathered the bones, and she told him that she would end the plague in the city if she got a proper Catholic burial. So the next morning, the man gathered the bones and he brought them down to the Cardinal of Palermo, asking him, you have a question?
You only have 5% left on batteries.
All right,
wrap it
I have
up.
only couple more sentences left. All right, so the Cardinal initially, when he showed him the bones, thought this man was crazy. I'm not going to bury some bones, give it I don't know what you're talking about. You're probably lying. But the plague continued to rage on. So the Cardinal of Palermo, in a desperate attempt, decided to take the man up on his offer, and they gave the bones of Ray.z.a a full Catholic dignitary procession and everything, burial. Because she was a princess of the Kingdom of Sicily, after all. And miraculously, almost miracle-like, the plague started subsiding right after this burial. And right on the spot, pretty much, Saint Ray.z.a was made the patron saint of Palermo and is revered all over the city in festivals and events to this day. Even one happened recently. It happens every year. They have a big festival to her. And even in 2020 COVID crisis, she has been especially prayed to. And the 4 previous patron saints that were from the martyrdom Roman times, they're still important, but Saint Ray.z.a, who was up on that rock, is loved in Palermo for 400 years after this. Believe. All right, one thing I forgot to mention was this grand cathedral. Look at this thing, man. It's freaking amazing. Before it was a mosque, it actually was a church, a Byzantine basilica church. Smaller in scale. So that church was built upon earlier buildings that were Roman and Carthaginian, and the mosque existed here for about 400 years or so. Less than that, actually. 3 layers of history are involved in this cathedral. That's what it is. So 1185 in its current state. You actually see a little bit of World War II damage on the archways here, which is kind of rough. And I'm fairly sure this part right here was the minaret part of the Grand Mosque that was converted. So a lot of this geometric design and arches are all Islamic. Interesting and often probably overlooked because it's a Catholic cathedral, but really it's a mix of all kinds of things, man. It's interesting to get into the heads of the people that were creating buildings like 1,000 years ago, so you don't know exactly what means what and who put what where and the secret symbolism maybe they were thinking of when they put things in certain areas. For example, a lot of Catholic stuff has Roman, even pagan symbolism ingrained into it that a lot of people don't realize. And this place definitely, look at this, man, above my head, awesome. This place is definitely fascinating, really cool.